Good morning. Welcome to the program. Today is Friday, November 6th, 2020. And just like some of us suspected, the lead change in Pennsylvania will likely be insurmountable for Donald Trump, and Joe Biden will be, at some point in time, after a bunch of frivolous legal challenges. Joseph Robinette Biden will be the 46th president of the United States, and his running mate, Senator from California Kamala Harris, will be the first black woman to be vice president of the United States. And if the runoffs go a particular direction in Georgia in the month of December, Kamala Harris could also be the tie-breaking vote for the Democrats in the U.S. Senate. Now, before we get to that point, there's still a lot that has to be done. I also want to talk about how the Democrats were such failures to capture legislative seats in the House of Representatives when it seems like the wind was at their back during these campaigns, during this election cycle, unlike any other time, certainly in the last 50 years. And so there is a conversation that took place between the Democratic family, the leadership in the House of Representatives, where explicatives were thrown back and forth amongst those Democrats. And I think that the broader voters in this country need to have an idea of where the Democrats are, because as it stands right now, if people just rest on their laurels and are just so happy that Donald Trump got defeated and Joseph Biden gets elected, Kamala Harris becomes the first black woman to be vice president, the shellacking the Democrats are going to take in 2022 is going to be shameful. Now, we have to get out ahead of that, but I want to discuss some details about that particular scenario, because this victory, quite honestly, is hollow. It's hollow for a variety of reasons, because something happened where Donald Trump, and I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, it's party loyalty and people are just loyal to the Republicans. Donald Trump is ultimately, so there's only about 91% of all of the votes counted, meaning that Donald Trump is going to get somewhere north of 74 or 75 million votes. He got 62 million votes in 2016. Now, all of the votes haven't been counted in places like Illinois, California, New York, which are already determined very blue states. And there's always some straggling precincts in smaller areas that still have yet to report their official counts before the final canvass, which takes place, and the presentation of these results to Congress in December, right around December 14th. Donald Trump got what will be in excess of 10, 12, 13 million more votes than he got in 2016. Whatever he is saying, more people bought this time than they did last time. And some of that falls squarely on the shoulders of the Democrats, but we'll get to that in just a second. First, let's talk about some good news. Democrat Joe Biden overtook President Donald Trump in the vote count in Pennsylvania and Georgia Friday morning, closing in on a presidency that hinges on the outcome of tight contests in key battleground states. Both races remain too early to call, with votes still being counted. Neither candidate has reached the 270 electoral college votes needed to win the White House, though Biden has the advantage after eclipsing Trump in Wisconsin and Michigan, two crucial Midwestern battleground states. Biden leads Trump by nearly 6,000 votes in Pennsylvania and just over 1,000 votes in Georgia. It could take several more days for the vote count to conclude in some areas, allowing a clear winner to emerge. With millions of ballots yet to be tabulated, Biden already has received more than 73 million votes nationally, the most in history. If the Republicans believe, and they don't, there was a cattle call put out to Donald Trump supporters, in that if they didn't come out and defend him on national media, Donald Trump would threaten, or the organization would threaten to turn Trump supporters against them. And that's when you see Rudy Giuliani, that's when you see Ted Cruz from Texas, Kevin McCarthy, the Republican leader, the minority leader in the House of Representatives, all trying to challenge legitimate votes that were submitted by the American people. I didn't see Donald Trump's press conference yesterday. I'm glad I didn't, because I would have been even more upset. He's trying to burn the entire democracy down. Good morning, Eileen Seeger. She says, I have the blues. I don't know why you would. This should be a happy moment, at least for a little while. This this slow, methodic, consistent devolving of Donald Trump's vote totals is ecstasy to me because this is how it should be. It should be slow for him. It should be painful. It should be miserable. I want him walking around discombobulated and confused. While that could be very dangerous for the country, this is exactly what he gets. And it will not stop after the votes are tallied and we get the final electoral college count. It will not stop after Inauguration Day. Donald Trump is going to wear this forever. Now, I'm also a little concerned about some things, as we all should be. He's going to try and hold these election results or pause the election as best he can. He also believes that with the 6-3 conservative majority on the U.S. Supreme Court, that he has a shot. But here's one thing I understand about this court, even though it's very different now. The face of this court is different. Where John Roberts, when he was appointed the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, when he was appointed by George W. Bush, we were very, very fearful because he was the conservative lightning rod at the time. What you have seen with John Roberts is not his slow momentum toward the left. It's just that the kind of conservatism that existed in the early 2000s seems liberal now. John Roberts has probably been one of the more consistent justices on that court, but in more decisions than I ever expected, including one regarding the Affordable Care Act, John Roberts sided with the more liberal justices, and he's no liberal. He was selected to be the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court because of his conservative proclivities and leanings. But he just seems like he's more and more to the left. But one thing I understand about this court, and I don't know if the Supreme Court has not even agreed to hear any case or any suit brought by the Trump campaign because they have no clear direction of what they want. Are they arguing fraud and fraudulent votes? Okay, produce some evidence. You cannot even get the U.S. Supreme Court to hear your arguments unless, first of all, there's been lower court rulings, and lower courts, which this U.S. Supreme Court tends to favor. So if there's not much you know about how the U.S. Supreme Court operates, either traditionally or this court, and we don't know what Amy Coney Barrett is going to do because she did recuse herself from a case that was in front of the court recently because it did involve this election. So she recused herself and it ended up being a tie 4-4. Courts have a process. And what this U.S. Supreme Court, if it has a theme, they defer to state courts. In Pennsylvania, state courts have already ruled that ballots can be received by mail up until Friday and they can be counted. There is no impetus for the U.S. Supreme Court to change a ruling that has already been affirmed by a state court. What Trump is trying to do is get them to completely usurp every single one of their tasks and duties to go ahead and throw out lower court rulings or state courts. U.S. Supreme Court doesn't really do that. It's very rare that it does that, and I don't expect it'll do that this time either. Tammy Reed says, welcome to election day number 4. Good morning, Vanessa Garrett. Denise Jones, good morning. Getting closer to a new president. Get ready for the ask. Oh, there'll be some pretty heavy asks, but Democrats need to get their asks together because there's no way the Democrats should have lost 5 seats. Republicans flipped Democratic seats. You guys know that? It went the complete opposite direction where Democrats that were in seats that leaned or slightly leaned conservative or seats that may have voted for Obama, then voted for Trump, Democrats lost those seats. There should have been some really easy pickups. Also, with the number of seats that Democrats were competitive in the U.S. Senate, it comes down to a runoff in Georgia. There's something going on, and I want to try and differentiate the national theme that the Democrats had that to some extent was helpful in defeating Donald Trump, but then there's also some very local themes. And when I say local themes, think of all of the protests. Every single protest that you saw, those are local political issues. Now, there's a national thread because in a bunch of American cities, the same issues, the same problems with law enforcement and policing and killing unarmed Black men and shooting Black men in their back. There's a commonality nationally, but those are still local issues. When you want to defund the police, you can't tell the Democrats they're supported by the DNC that are running a national campaign to defund the police. You defund the police or think of other strategies in your particular city. That killed the Democrats, especially in much more moderate, slightly conservative leaning districts. That scared the bejesus out of folks. Oh no, the Democrats want to defund the police. That's why Joe Biden had to divorce himself, and he even had to run ads pushing back on that. No, I don't want to defund the police. I'm going to give the police more money so they can be better. That is specifically what hurt the Democrats in districts that they should have picked up in Congress. Gail Williams, good morning. Lemon Harris says, breaking news, Trump and his supporters are moving to Jonestown, free beverages for all. Oh, they've been on Jonestown Island. They've been there for a while. It's sad when you think about it. And another thing that's sad is that there could be more destructive elements that come about. I'm not necessarily worried about Trump supporters because they are so drastically and vastly outnumbered, because where the votes were more rich for Joe Biden, those, Trump protesters that are trying to tell people to stop the count, they're not going to come to the places where the cities are deep blue and the counties are deep blue. They're going to be somewhere on the outskirts or places where the vote counts were marginal. It was weird because they had protests in Milwaukee last night. Stupid, but what I'm more worried about is ultimately when all of the votes are counted, right? So all of the places in California and Washington State and Oregon that have already been called blue, that were called blue as soon as their polls closed, they still have votes yet to report. And it's not going to change the outcome of the election. But what you're going to see is Joe Biden's vote total probably approach somewhere near 80 million. That's a lot of people. Even the people that did not vote or cast a vote or for whatever reason were prevented from voting, that would still lean toward supporting Joe Biden and not wanting Donald Trump to be the president of the United States, are going to grow increasingly impatient with these immature, petulant children who have lost the presidential campaign. In America, a growing number of people, an overwhelming majority of not just voters, but people in this country, would rather see Donald Trump out of the White House than being the commander-in-chief. And as people's patience begins to grow thinner and thinner with all of these people that will not accept the fact that they lost the election and Donald Trump stacked the courts because he knew he was going to lose the election, people's patience is going to run out. And then you're going to have a series of conversations about what we're going to do because of Donald Trump, because he told us this. Why we didn't prepare better for it, I don't know. There wouldn't be a peaceful transition of power, or he wouldn't commit to it. And that's an issue. I don't know how true it is, but all options need to be considered so we can be best prepared. I was told that if Donald Trump seeks to prolong this process, because now it's going to become abundantly clear. By the time we wake up Monday morning, it's inevitable. We need to start moving forward with a transition, which the Biden campaign is doing. There's been an additional some setup and some staff in Delaware where Joe Biden is likely to make his official announcement and declaration of victory. So we're moving toward that. And you can't prevent that just because you want to stop votes. The American people spoke loud, and they spoke, I think, pretty clear. More clear in some places than others, but they made it clear. Here's what we want to do. Here's the direction we want to go in. Doesn't mean the Democrats are perfect. Doesn't mean the Democrats got everything right. But this is where we're headed. And the longer Trump tries to prevent that process, I've heard that there's the consideration of a general strike. I got to be very, very clear when I explain this because that's a very dangerous situation. If Donald Trump doesn't want to leave office and tries to push these court cases, even though, and they're going to go jurisdiction shopping, they're going to file suits all over the place in courts in which they think they can get some kind of a fair hearing, which ultimately won't happen, but all of that is going to take time. Americans, especially with the coronavirus cases that are still growing, 100,000 cases a day, which is what Anthony Fauci warned about, his worst case scenario. It's literally happening right now. And that has a lot to do with how Donald Trump lost this election, his poor response on the coronavirus. But a general strike would mean, and to my friends and sisters and brothers who are in organized labor, I'm sorry that I'm leaking this, but I'm just putting it out there because it has been discussed. It is being talked about. Where if Donald Trump seeks to hang on to the presidency, the economy in the United States is going to stop until he leaves. General strike means all labor, all working people will not go to work. Everything will grind to a screeching halt until Donald Trump leaves. That is a drastic worst case scenario, but one that has to be considered because I didn't see his press conference yesterday, but apparently he was very unhinged, more unhinged than usual, even though he was reading from prepared remarks. This man is trying to incite a coup in the democracy of the United States. I got an article about that, whether I read it or not, I'm not sure. Vic McGee, good morning to you. G. Collins says, good morning. Lisa Miller, good morning to you. Renee Shaver, Sherwin, it doesn't matter what Trump's trying to do anymore. Joe Biden is the president-elect. The media is stalling while they prepare for the transition. We can't call him the president-elect yet. I know we want to. I know that all of the evidence says that he could be and should be the president-elect, but that's a real specific set of words that are put together only in perfect circumstances of enough, if not all, of the votes being counted, where there are still some votes outstanding. And I think it's a little bit disrespectful to the American people that voted, that haven't yet had their votes counted, to call Joe Biden the president-elect. Now, in my mind, he is the president-elect. But before we say that he is, we need to make sure that the lead in Pennsylvania needs to be one that cannot be retracted by any kind of recount. Once we get to that point, once it starts getting into the tens of thousands, like it is here in Wisconsin, 20,000 votes, and when you have a recount, you're going to find 500 or 600 votes that may swing either way, of course. But even if it's that many votes for either candidate, think about the accuracy of the count. If we're talking about 3.6 million votes, and you find discrepancies in maybe 500 or 600, that's incredibly accurate. And again, not enough to statistically sway the election. But let's get to that point, because if there's still some things that are in flux, if Pennsylvania stays stuck at 99% reporting through the month of December, that's going to give Republicans and conservatives some cause to say, uh-oh, there's fraud in that 1%. Let's count every single vote, and let's get the truest, loudest voice of what American voters did on November 3rd. Flynn says, good morning, Sherwin. Grateful to be here. We're glad to have you. Feeling hopeful and anxious. Trump is a dictator and people follow blindly. Terrifying. How can you not see it? You know, I think people see it. But I've been trying to stay objective, which I'm doing a terrible job at, to try and figure out how so many people could be so completely oblivious to facts on everything, and how they can hang on the words of a man who was told 25 or 26,000 documented lies. If you're a fact checker for Donald Trump, that is a full-time job, and I hope it pays benefits. The fact that he got more votes, individual votes, this time, he's going to lose the election. He's basically lost it already. And as time goes on, he's losing worse and worse and worse. But the people, especially the expanded base, Republicans were able to capture congressional seats on Donald Trump's expanded base, and it's his Republican Party. Love it or hate it, it's his. And in his Republican Party, he was able to attract more voters than any other Republican in history. We're going to have to contend with those people. Now, it'll probably end up being somewhere close to 75 or 76 million people when all of the votes are counted. This is for Donald Trump. Joe Biden is going to have closer to 80 million. Some are more extreme than others, those Trump supporters, but we're going to have to deal with them because they're not going to go away. Most of them are not going to change their minds. The militias are not automatically going to disappear. They feel even more under attack and under threat than ever before, because some of them will, for the rest of their lives, are going to think that this election was stolen from Donald Trump. When you count all the votes and everything is fair, when the playing field is level, it feels like oppression to them because they're so used to the scales being tipped in their favor. And that's what Donald Trump did for 4 years. He gave an element in this society that shouldn't even exist. And I put it on Twitter because I'm a little bit more bold on Twitter than I am on Facebook. Twitter lets me get away with a little bit more. Donald Trump needs to be tried at Nuremberg because of what he's done to this democracy. But there are supporters that are going to go down with him, that will destroy this nation with him. They're putting out covert calls to violence every single day. Those people are not going to go away. We're always going to have to deal with them. You know that there was a QAnon believer that was elected to the House of Representatives on Tuesday? We have a real problem here. So that's why I say the victory is hollow. From the Philadelphia Inquirer, Biden takes the lead in Pennsylvania. Former Vice President Joe Biden is now leading President Trump in Pennsylvania as the Commonwealth continues to count mail ballots. Biden now leads Trump by 5,587 votes, according to numbers reported by the Commonwealth. Here's where Pennsylvania stands. Joseph R. Biden, 3,295,304 votes, or 49.4%. Donald Trump, 3,289,717, or 49.3%. Following victories in Michigan and Wisconsin, a Biden victory in Pennsylvania will push him past the 270 Electoral College votes and would catapult him to the presidency. From Senator Toomey in Pennsylvania, there is no evidence of widespread fraud in the election results, Republican Pennsylvania Senator Pat Toomey said this morning. During an interview on NBC's Today Show, Toomey pushed back on outlandish remarks made by President Donald Trump, who has repeated baseless allegations of election fraud and falsely claimed he had already won the election at a White House news briefing Thursday night. Quote, the president's allegations of large-scale fraud and theft of the election are just not substantiated. I'm not aware of any significant wrongdoing here, Senator Toomey said. This is the sort of thing you wish wouldn't happen, Toomey added. But is there evidence that I'm aware of that is significant large-scale fraud or malfeasance in Pennsylvania? Absolutely not. So finally, a Republican senator's getting some courage to step out and say that there is no fraud. Secret Service is sending more agents to Delaware in anticipation of a potential Biden win. More U.S. Secret Service agents have been sent to Wilmington, Delaware in anticipation of a potential Joe Biden presidential win. CNN has learned the extra Secret Service agents were sent to Delaware on Thursday, two sources said, one with law enforcement and the other was not revealed. Some context for that. Upon a presidential win, the United States Secret Service detail for a president-elect would get larger and mirror the size and scope of a president's. Additional airspace security measures are also implemented. A source familiar with the Secret Service protocol said a team for Biden has been on standby since last week. I want to have a map.
Christmas
here
is
somewhere.
coming
Why
soon,
is that playing?
and you can prepare.
Don't do that. Where's my map of Georgia? There is, oh, here it is. I want to share this with you guys. Hang on a second, bear with me. And I want to show some of the vote totals. Georgia is the shocker of this entire election cycle. The Midwest, Minnesota, because the polling for the last year showed that Joe Biden was looking favorable in Wisconsin. In Michigan, the polls were actually outpacing that of Wisconsin and Minnesota. So Michigan wasn't really that much of a worry or a consideration. With me, I was more concerned that there would be election day irregularities in Michigan. But when you think about it, the vote by mail system, even though it's annoying people because of how much longer it takes to count, is a sufficient way for Americans to cast their votes, whether there's a pandemic or not, because it's easy, it's convenient, people have now gotten used to it, and if it can produce the desired result, a Democratic presidential win, then there will be people that will continue to vote by mail, and I'm all for it. Even though I voted early in person at Midtown, which of course was the polling location in the city of Milwaukee that outperformed all of the other early vote locations, and I'm gonna hang my hat on that. So let's see what we can do. I want to show you guys this map of Atlanta. So go like this, go like that, go like this. Okay. Look at some of these numbers here. So here you have counties surrounding Atlanta. Look at Joe Biden's vote percentage. DeKalb County, 83% of the votes for Joe Biden, 15% for Donald Trump. Here's another one. Gwinnett County, 58% for Biden, 40% for Trump. Fulton County, 72% for Biden, 26% for Donald Trump. And so when you see a lot of red, either red states, these large pieces of American geography where all of the states are red, the population is so small there that 2 or 3 metro areas in different parts of the country can outvote entire states and give higher percentages to Democratic candidates. Cobb County, 56% for Biden, 42% for Trump. Douglas County, 61 for Biden, 36 for Donald Trump. Fulton County, we did that one already. Clayton County, 84%. And look at the number of votes, 93,000 to 15,000. Henry County, 59% to 39%. But then if you just go just out, literally the county that borders, where's Fulton County at? Here's Fulton County. Let's go to a county that borders Fulton County. So Fulton County is 72% for Biden, 26% for Donald Trump. We go here. It flips dramatically. 67% for Trump, 31% for Biden in a county that's literally right next door. Let's go to Carroll County, 68% for Trump, but look at the votes, 37,444 to 16,000. But then you go to Cobb County, which was 56% for Biden. Look at the number of votes, almost 250,000 votes there. Let's go to another one. Paulding County, 63% for Trump, 34% for Joe Biden, but they're smaller in population. This is a trend that we are likely to see in this country. The redder the area, the redder the county or the district, the smaller the population is. And also, rural America there's not as much opportunity there. People are moving to cities. Why wouldn't they? More opportunity, more jobs, more action, more entertainment, more of everything in cities. And there tends to be a leaning toward Democratic politics in large cities because it speaks to the diversity of large cities than in some of these smaller towns. Hall County, Donald Trump wins that with 70% of the vote, but it's only 64,000 votes. Let's go down here to Savannah. 58% for Joe Biden, 39% for Donald Trump. Liberty County, 61% for Joe Biden, 37% for Donald Trump. And then you have this red swath right here in the middle. That's Bryan County, 66% for Trump, 31% for Joe Biden. Let's go to Albany, Georgia here in Dougherty County, 69% Biden, 29% Trump. Calhoun County, 57-42. Clay County, 55-44. Randolph County, 54-45. It was these places. We got here Macon, Georgia here. 61% for Joe Biden, 37% for Donald Trump. But these areas were able to carry the entire state. Now, the question is, can Georgia remain blue? And also, this is really good information for the Democrats because there are 2 U.S. Senate runoffs. If nobody gets 50% of the vote in Georgia elections, you go to a runoff, which will take place the next month. Do you have any idea, guys, how many dollars, the resources are going to be poured into Georgia for those Senate runoffs? Because this is the shot the Democrats need to get a very small, simple majority in the U.S. Senate that will make policies a lot easier to put into practice. The other thing is this. I think we're a long way off from another Supreme Court selection. You've got the next to retire would be Clarence Thomas. And let me see what there's one other justice whose name I cannot think of. Hold on. U.S. Supreme Court justices. I never can. These names are on the tip of my tongue, but I just can't. There's one more who's he's in his 80s. Stephen Breyer. He could be the next. But it also is very possible that Clarence Thomas and Stephen Breyer don't retire during Joe Biden's first term, meaning no U.S. Supreme Court selections during Joe Biden's first 4 years in office. And I do not suspect Joe Biden runs for re-election. So that's why they were in such a rush to get Amy Coney Barrett appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court, because there probably won't be a retirement on that court for the foreseeable future. Read some of the comments here. Let's see where I left off. Denise Jones says, I'm with you, Sherwin. We will never understand the Trump supporters, especially the Black supporters. That is desperate, people. You know, even if I try to apply some logic to it, it's not going to make sense. What is it about? So after you had 4 years to absorb what he did, or even 2 years. By the midterm election, the majority of the country had already turned away from Donald Trump. But that's suspected, and Democrats need to have that expectation in mind in 2022 because these midterm elections are going to start immediately. All of the places in which Democrats lost ground and did not win seats they should have won during this most recent presidential election, they're going to double down and try and get those seats and try and get those majorities in 2022. But I don't know if Democrats are reading the writing on the wall of how we missed the mark with America. And the defunding the police strategy, which sounded really, really good because it looked like it was an answer to police violence, that strategy or that political idea should not have been at the national level. That is local. Your police departments are not controlled by the federal government. Now, the federal government can provide resources and funding to some extent to local law enforcement, but those are decisions that are made at city budget hearings, which nobody ever goes to. That's why we don't get the kind of reform. And also, there's the argument between the Democratic Socialists and what their influence was on Bernie Sanders supporters and other folks that believe this entire process is broken. We could argue that maybe they helped. We also could argue that the theme of socialism hurt Democrats. It did not help. Now, it may have helped to have mentions of some of those policies to more liberal and progressive voters. But those liberal and progressive voters that want Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to lean Democratic socialists need to get more involved in local politics. And I'm going to tell you why. Our chairwoman of the Milwaukee County Board of Supervisors, one of the more, if not the most powerful legislator in Milwaukee County, is a Democratic socialist, and she got elected, and nobody cares. Not only did she get elected, she is the chairwoman. She was elected by her colleagues to lead the legislative branch of Milwaukee County government. That is where those kinds of political leanings belong, at the local level. So we can take a look at everything that is happening in Milwaukee County, in the city of Milwaukee, and apply a much more liberal understanding to some of the things that have been keeping communities of color downtrodden. But when you put it on a national level, you're scaring moderate voters that don't want to see the police defunded. And I know that can cause some anxiety with folks because the police are terrible and they're killing Black people. You think I don't know that? But you got to be very, very careful of what your national message is, because there are literally some people that could vote either way. If we didn't learn that from 2012 to 2016 to 2020, there were Barack Obama voters that voted for Hillary Clinton. There were Barack Obama voters that voted for Donald Trump. When you talk socialism to them, when they think or they connect the Biden campaign and Kamala Harris's quote unquote liberal record, which it really wasn't all that liberal at all when she was in the US Senate, certainly not liberal when she was Attorney General of California, that scares those voters. When it comes to presidential contests, we need as many voters as we can get, meaning that if we have to not say certain things and not talk about certain things, so those much more left-leaning ideas and proposals don't stick to the national candidate, that's what we need to do. Otherwise, we're going to get close elections that always boil down to the percentages of Black people that turn out in big cities. Put a map up yesterday in the Forum Facebook group. If you're not a member, you should join. And it shows if certain constituencies, white men, white women, people of color, if they voted in every state, what those maps would look like. And there was only one map that was blue in all 50 states. It is people of color. And then I had to argue with a whole bunch of white people that got angry, saying, no, that's not true, because I know a whole bunch of people of color that vote for Donald Trump. It's amazing how I had to get into fights and block people based upon that map. If you want the country to be blue, if you want more Democratic states, if you want more electoral college votes for the Democrats, Black and brown people are competing with white people to turn some of these states blue. But it's amazing that we put so much pressure on the backs of Black and brown voters, but put very little pressure on some of these liberals and progressives that are married to a Trump voter, whose parents, whose grandparents, whose friends, whose colleagues, people they socialize with are Trump supporters. They don't say anything about that. Black people need to take up the slack and wear on our backs a disproportionately high voter turnout to take up for the people that are still going to vote for Republicans, even though it's against their best interest. If you're a high school educated white person in this country, Donald Trump hates you so much that he'll have you come to a rally, lie to your face, give you the coronavirus, and then leave you out there in the cold because the buses that were bringing people to the rallies disappeared. that just there's something deeper going on that I don't understand, and maybe I'm glad that I don't understand it because I would probably be more upset if I really realized the deep psychology that exists in what is going to be close to 75 million people in this country. I'm not buying the excuse of, well, I like him because he's the economy and a businessman. He literally failed at everything. There were zero successes out of this administration. The failures were in double digits. Everything he did. Renee says, Sherwin, doesn't matter what Trump's trying to do anymore. Joe Biden is the president-elect. The media is stalling while they prepare for the transition. Apparently, that's where I left off last. Eileen Seeger, the groups that are most disappointed in this turnout are the Lincoln Project and conservative never Trumpers who were kicked out of the Republican Party. Strange bedfellows. So the Never Trumpers and the Lincoln Project, and I just love some of the ads that the Lincoln Project did. And they raised a whole bunch of money. And I think they took some money from would-be successful Democratic congressional campaigns, and because the Lincoln Project was very well funded. But the commercials that they did and the ads that they ran were so hard-hitting because they knew to hit Trump where it hurt because they're Republicans too. So they knew exactly what to say. They knew exactly how to message to resonate with a disaffected former Trump supporter, former Republican, and they were really, really important messages to get out. But at the same time, there was money that was invested in the Lincoln Project because they were competing for the same donor dollars that Joe Biden was, wanting to use for his presidential campaign. But it's amazing how we had to get former Republicans to vote for Joe Biden to try and make up for the people that still said they were going to sit out this election because they didn't like either candidate, who would be natural Democratic allies, but because they weren't able to fall in love with Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, they weren't able to fall in love with an agenda they thought was too moderate. Those people that still say, oh, well, it doesn't matter if it's Joe Biden or Donald Trump, they're both Republicans. Those folks could not be more wrong, and we're missing the mark with them as well. But also, people use elections as a time to rebel. They're unhappy with things. We're all unhappy with things. They're not seeing the effects of policies that Democrats have been talking about for many, many years. I'm not seeing the effects of those policies either. And so they really don't care. And I'm not asking people to be committed to one political party or the other, but try to have a better vision for America. Instead of thinking about right now, think about how much worse things can be 4 years later. When Donald Trump got elected, I knew that we were going to have some trouble, but I never in a million years, I almost couldn't believe what I was seeing, what I was hearing most days. And I spent 4 years in almost complete and utter bewilderment. And I had the luxury of being able to talk about it and to discuss all of these things I was seeing every day. And I still could not wrap my head around what was happening in this country. Worse than that, the amount of people that either were silent, complacent, or supportive of what he was doing. Melissa, good morning, Melissa. We need to look at post-World War II Germany and the denazification program that morphed into, quote, collective guilt if we are ever going to deprogram MAGAs. Interesting surveys were done by the US that are relevant. Ooh, I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree. You know how easy it is for people to fall into fascism? It didn't take a lot of effort. It didn't even take a majority of the popular vote in 2016 for not only for people to fall into fascism, but for it to expand and for Republicans to pick up seats in the House of Representatives, including a QAnon supporter. There's a QAnon nutcase, cult conspiracy theorist going to the House of Representatives. We have a problem here. And we can't lose more people because presidential candidates who have to make deals. They're going to have to work with Republicans. I know that we want to live in a place where you don't have to work with the opposite side at all. And trust me, we're trying to achieve that with supermajorities, but it's a long shot. And until you reach those supermajorities, which quite honestly are bad for US government, there's supposed to be some kind of compromise between the two parties. But until we reach the supermajority in the courts, in the legislature, and in the executive branch, you have to work with the other party. You have to. Like it or not, Joe Biden does have long-standing relationships to some of these Republicans, including Mitch McConnell, because Joe Biden has worked with them for 40 years. And they hated Joe Biden because, oh, you've been in Washington for 47 years and you haven't done anything. The 47 years that he has been in Washington is important right now. You can't get a rookie, a newcomer, a freshman that doesn't know the secrets that have been told in those smoky back rooms when Joe Biden was working with segregationists in the South, because you have to. You can't just say, not going to talk to you, not going to work with you. You are elected by the people to compromise with people so we don't have to. That's why we put people in Washington, to talk to folks that we don't want to have any conversations with whatsoever. Come up with an idea, go figure it out, smoke some cigars, drink some scotch, and come up with a policy that is amenable to at least 51% of the people. That's it. It's not to change the world. You change the world at the local level. We begin at the local level in our own cities. We try to put way too much on presidential candidates and presidential campaigns. Democrats already have a full plate. If you look at the variety of issues that would cause somebody to vote for a Democrat, it's nearly impossible. Some of that has to be taken up at the local level, but local politics is not as sexy. Doesn't spend as much money. The commercials aren't as snarky. It's not as creative, but that's what democracy is. It's a lot of small, fine print. Social change takes a really, really long time, and it takes even longer if people are not willing to see where sizable gains can get made, especially when it comes to reforming law enforcement. Donald Trump he made his opinions known. I think that's what presidential candidates and presidents can do. They can make their opinion known. Donald Trump said, hey cops, here's what I want you to do. Not, we're going to have a federal policy that allows the police to blah, 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 blah. No, that's all local stuff. But it's good that we have more people's attention now. And hopefully some of the folks that are going to be very disappointed by the first pieces of legislation that are promoted and supported by the Biden administration, to take that anger and that anxiety to the local level. I want to see more young people that are out there in the streets burning up shoe leather all summer long. And God bless you. I'm glad you were out there. Especially those Gen Zers who are like the toughest things I've ever seen as an American generation. Like, they're immune to tear gas and coronavirus for some reason. They need to be in office. They really do. Because once they get in and they see where the sausage is made, they'll realize that some of the things that they were supporting and promoting, especially on social media, once you get there and once you have a 5,000 page city budget or county budget in front of you, it ain't easy. We need more people to get involved at the lowest levels of government. At some point, we're going to have to talk about education, going to have to talk about public education. What is education going to look like in America? You still going to have people paying $50, $75, $100,000 a year tuition to these top-notch schools and still be learning from home? What are we going to do? Are high school kids ever going to be able to graduate again? Is all learning going to be virtual? That's local stuff. You know what the turnout is in school board elections? Next to zero. Gail Williams said, you said something interesting. Do you think Trump could be brought up on charges before the ICC for crimes against humanity for his lack of action dealing with COVID-19 pandemic in the US? Nope. Donald Trump will be forgiven before he is tried. Mark my words on that. What are your thoughts on term limits and age maximum across all government? 10-year representatives tend to lose touch modern times. So you can't do age limits because that would set a dangerous precedent, meaning that you set an age limit like that, you can't do that. That's unconstitutional, highly illegal, because then they could say, okay, well, you can't be over 65 and run for political office. There might be some retirees just out in the real world that may want to go back to work because Social Security dried up. And they could easily say, well, if we're not going to let people run for office after the age of 65, we're not going to hire you to be a greeter at Walmart. So you can't do that. So there are term limits already. I don't think that, so that's more regulation. And I typically have a more liberal view on regulation, but term limits already exist. Term limits are the voters. If the voters don't want you to run for a 7th term in Congress, you're going to lose. If the voters believe you're doing a good job, and if this, I'm using Congress as an example, could be a mayor because we don't have term limits really for anything in Wisconsin. The voters set the term limits. When states arbitrarily put in term limits, and there's a lot, I think Virginia actually, their governor has termed out. When you put in term limits, you're saying, I don't trust the voters. You're saying that there needs to be a heavy amount of turnover in this office. If the voters want to send somebody back because there is a long list of accomplishments, and if you send somebody back and this time they get a Democratic legislature, but they can get things done in a Republican legislature, if the voters want to send that person back, because politics is it's a game of addition. You build on your previous term and your previous record. And if the voters like what has been built, then I don't think that you all of a sudden have to cut somebody off when they're just getting to the sweet spot of their executive or legislative career. That's just my opinion. I know some people are, very much in favor of term limits, but they already exist. You can't tell the voters that if you really want to send somebody back for a third term, but term limits say, nope, that's it, they're done after two, you will start over with somebody else. And that, again, prolongs progress. And I think we're in a place in America where we cannot wait longer for progress. So if somebody wants to serve 10 terms in a row, 20 terms in a row, the voters make that determination. It shouldn't be some law that's on the books. Eileen Seeger, I don't think the Democratic Socialists help general elections. I believe the untapped potential are moderate voters on both sides of the aisle that find themselves without a political party to identify. So there's that. There's whatever the independent voters are and moderate voters, people that don't really subscribe to a political party. They are more issue voters. I believe that. But I also would say Joe Biden became the Democratic nominee because of the amount of delegates he received. Joe Biden received the amount of delegates he did because of state presidential primary elections. The first 3 or 4 contests in the nominating season for the Democrats, it starts with the Iowa caucuses, then it's what's next? New Hampshire, and then they go to Nevada. Those 3. States that have majority black, I'm not even saying people of color, I'm saying majority black voters, don't even vote until the majority white states go first. Can anybody explain to me, now that we hopefully are going to get a Joe Biden inauguration in January, and now maybe cooler heads are going to prevail because Democrats did everything they were supposed to do and elected Joe Biden? Can we explain the significance of Iowa being the first state in the country for the primary process? It is so an unrealistic place. And Iowa's a red state, by the way. But for all of these candidates to him and to haw and to go to all 99 counties in Iowa, I shouldn't even know how many counties there are in Iowa, because we always promote and talk about, the Iowa caucuses are coming up. What that does is it unnecessarily skews Democratic presidential candidates to the right, because Iowa is a red state. And if you want to come on ahead in Iowa, you're going to have to appeal to way too many conservative voters. More conservative voters than I would agree are in the electoral college math as a whole. It screws everything up. Plus, Iowa had the worst debacle in history in trying to put their caucus on most recently. And that was before the coronavirus. The most moderate voters we have in this country as a group, as a cohort, are African Americans. There was a clip I was going to play this morning. Maybe I'll play it at the end of the program, that talks about how if you're white in this country, you don't have to know anything about people of color. Like, you're not required to. Like, if you don't know anything about black people, you can still graduate from high school. If you don't know anything about black history or the contributions of African Americans in this country, you can graduate from high school, you can graduate from college. In fact, you can get a job working in those communities not knowing anything. But as a black person, I have learned so much European history and American history. We know, as a part of our education in this nation, it wasn't just in grade school, it wasn't just in high school, but it was even in college. I knew so much about white people and white history and European history and the Crusades and the wars that I almost was an expert on white people, but could not, share the same details about a white person knowing about black history. And because that is intrinsic in black people that live in America, our education system is tilted toward Eurocentrism. I want you to follow me here. I'm going somewhere. So when African Americans get their opportunity to vote in presidential primaries, we are going to that ballot box knowing what we have to do to get a Democrat elected. And sometimes it's picking the one that can appeal to white people because we know white people better than they know us. That's why you got Joe Biden. It wasn't even close. I just had an argument with somebody yesterday about Bernie Sanders. Do you think Bernie Sanders would have produced this electoral college result? You're nuts. You're nuts. Bernie Sanders would have been landslid by Donald Trump because the moniker of socialism and the socialist candidates is why Democrats lost seats in the House. If a devout Democratic socialist, who's not even a member of the Democratic Party, became the nominee, Donald Trump would have landslid this election. I cannot believe I still have to have this conversation. Bernie took advantage of a sympathy to fascism too. He just did it from the left. All the things that Bernie Sanders was proposing, a president can't do. You need a legislature to do those things. You can't. You can just romanticize people into thinking their college loans are going to be forgiven and the healthcare is going to be free, that we're going to get rid of private insurance and we're going to destroy corporations and take away all of their money. If Bernie Sanders was able to do that, number one, why hasn't he done it? The other thing is, and this is what makes me a little upset, Bernie Sanders voted for the 1994 crime bill too. Did nobody say anything about that? Not a word. Joe Biden, it was him. You think Joe Biden did it alone? He had a lot of help. Too much help, actually. What do we got here? Yesterday, I spoke with a black man, says Denise Jones, that was a number 45 supporter. He didn't wear a mask, didn't believe 45 was responsible for COVID-19 response or handling, didn't believe Democrats represent him. I mean, that exists. There are some people that, and do I want to say the word? I guess ignorant is a word. Because if your life has been on a particular trajectory, especially if things haven't worked out for you, if you haven't gotten a fair shake and it's always been worrying about, the next paycheck or the next meal, then you have seen Democratic policies fail you. What Donald Trump allows people to believe, especially folks that don't know how these systems work and how incredibly complicated government and policy is, he tells them, just be free, just do whatever you want. Go open your business. You don't have to wear a mask. And ultimately, Americans have lapped that up. We want freedom. We don't like restrictions. We don't want people, especially the government, telling us what to do. Especially, here's another example. When people got their first stimulus check of $1,200, hell, I thought Donald Trump was going to win. If he kept sending stimulus checks, you might have a different electoral college map today. Thank God he didn't. But when you ask the government for something and they provide it, there's a level of sympathy that the body politic gives to the government. But then when you ask again and again, because I would argue that people needed a second and a third and a fourth stimulus check just as much as they needed the first. But when you ask for the government and it does not provide, it does not make substantial change, it does not help you pay your mortgage or feed your family, then you can say, screw the entire thing. I'm going to go it alone. Donald Trump speaks to the people that want to go it alone. But they can also say, well, my life has been tough. I'm just going to keep on going. Things are never going to change. So if Donald Trump says that I can go out in public and not wear a mask and that the coronavirus is a hoax, so be it. It's a real simple way of viewing things. But again, folks that have that attitude are not exactly paying attention to scientific data and fact, and hardly are virologists. It's just a very simple understanding of the world. They believe that politics doesn't have an effect, especially if your life has been relatively consistent. It's those people that don't invest a lot of their time and energy into voting and into the political process because you know what? They're essentially fine, or maybe just below fine, or if they're super rich, it literally doesn't matter who the president is. Wealth is able to inoculate you in this country, so can ignorance. Jay says, we can't run for president until we are 35. How is that different? Why would you want somebody who doesn't have the life experience to be if you don't have life experience, and 35 is actually too young. That's really, because America would pull a trick on us again. Like Donald Trump was the first trick. And let's say they took that requirement out, right? You could be 26, 25 years old and run for president. America would do an end around and elect a 25-year-old kid to become president of the United States, and we'd be even more screwed. You need an amount, and I don't even know what the rationale behind it is. I just know that, and I don't even know if I would vote for somebody that's 35, especially if I'm 45 years old and I know how much growing and maturing and learning I did from 35 to 45. You still have so much to learn about yourself in those, what I'm going to call the adult middle-aged formative years. I mean, youth is cool and everything, but when it comes to having the nuclear codes and having to negotiate with foreign dictators that are way more intelligent and have way more education and more life experience, foreign dictators and foreign leaders that have worked with 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 American presidents, we can't put a young person, I say 35 is young, up against that kind of international maturity. That's me. Because I was 35 once, I was 30 once, I was 25 once. This is my opinion. Judy B says, I don't understand why U.S. Supreme Court appointments are for a lifetime. They should be limited to 10 years maximum. That's some old founding father stuff. But you also got to keep this in mind. So when that provision was created, I'd imagine it probably existed during the first Constitutional Convention between 1789 and 1791. People weren't living past 50. When Social Security became a thing, right? You get Social Security, is it 65? When are you eligible? 62 and a half? 65? Life expectancy in the late 1960s, when it was signed into law by LBJ, wasn't much past 68 or 69 anyway. And so people weren't living as long, meaning that you pay into Social Security for your entire life, your entire working life, and you only collect benefits until life expectancy at the time, which was like 68, 69 years old. They never accounted for, the framers of the Constitution didn't account for Supreme Court justices to live to be almost 90 years old. You appoint somebody back then, you appoint somebody at 46, they were off the court in 4 years. So life expectancy has gone on dramatically. It's expanded dramatically. And I would say that's a testament to, medicine and science, and people still don't believe in that. But I guess there needs to be an entire revamping of everything, right? Should Supreme Court justice, first of all, should there only be 9? Because I'd imagine the left is going to come up with a hefty set of ideas of why we need to pack the courts with more justices to water down the conservative strength on the court. That's going to come back to get us if we do that, just so people know. But the reason why Social Security is under such threat, you have got people that have been collecting Social Security in some cases longer than they have been paying in. So I think you need 40 quarters. So 10 years of working and paying into Social Security so that you are eligible for some benefit, not your maximum benefit, but your minimum benefit. So there are legitimately some people that only work for those 40 quarters for 10 years, but are 92 years old and are still getting Social Security benefits, meaning that they've been collecting benefits for 70 years when they only paid in for 10. Because of life expectancy, Social Security is now under a tremendous amount of threat. And that is why I was all for amnesty for people that are not citizens in this nation, because we need as many people working as possible to pay for the people that are collecting Social Security right now. If somebody's in this country and they're working already, might as well make them legal, give them a legitimate Social Security number, let them pay into the system so we can make sure that surviving Social Security beneficiaries have money coming to them, not to mention for future and subsequent generations. Jay says, I disagree with your Bernie comments. I would expect. I've been disagreeing with Bernie folks since the beginning of time. We get behind a candidate that we don't like because that's who on the ballot. It would be the same for Bernie. So is it still this love affair that the Democrats have with, like, you have to love a candidate? And I know there was an affection for Donald Trump. There still is, because you can see it destroying American democracy. But loving a candidate and loving their ability to actually get their proposals into law to make systemic change are two different things. Bernie Sanders was vying for the Democratic nomination, but wouldn't even join the Democratic Party. That in and of itself is disrespectful. So let's say Bernie Sanders did get elected in some parallel universe. Do you think that there are members of Congress, especially Republicans, that would ever entertain or vote for any idea that came out of the Bernie Sanders administration? Nope. Bernie Sanders would have been all rhetoric. You know what that would have done? It would have destroyed the country, because there were a lot of people that believed in every single thing that he was saying, because he also appealed to misery that existed in people that weren't making less than $15 an hour, people that are drowning in student loan debt, people that, can't afford health insurance, or if they have some, catastrophic illness, their health insurance premiums are just too high and they can't pay their medical bills. He was appealing to those folks. But how you get those situations rectified in this country, Bernie Sanders could not have done it. He was essentially a man without a party. And he's from Vermont. Vermont is not representative, the people in Vermont, not representative of the United States. Compare somebody from Vermont, where Bernie Sanders has represented folks for 40 years, to the metro area of Atlanta or Chicago or Los Angeles. You can't. I have a variety of issues with Bernie, because I knew that we would have to deal with those that he romanticized, and then have to convince them that they got lied to, like Trump supporters got lied to as well. They promised all these things, whether it's free Medicare or Medicare for all, or building a wall. Whether it's we're going to destroy private insurance, or we're going to ban Muslims from coming into the country. Bernie Sanders also was so incredibly blind to the issues of race in this country, it was staggering. He thinks that racial issues are just an extension of economic inequality. You fix the economic inequality, and then all of a sudden people aren't going to be racist toward Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, and blacks. That's preposterous. But that comes from someone who has represented one of the whitest states in America. He just can't see. I don't think Bernie Sanders is a racist. I think he's also made some very off-kilter comments about, we have, issues for, working class people, and then there's people of color, and they have their issues too. Like, he separates people of color completely differently, not thinking that we can be inclusive of the situation that exists in America for working class people. And he literally stratified, and there's brown people and Mexican people. The quote is out there somewhere. I know I'm botching it. He just doesn't. And plus, aren't y'all sick of old white guys? Like, Joe Biden is too old. Oh, we have these old white guys running for president. He's so old. Oh my God, why can't we find somebody else? Bernie Sanders is older than Joe Biden. But because he was speaking to a constituency in this country that feels uneasy because they're left out and they're left behind, he was able to romanticize them in such a way that they didn't care that Bernie Sanders voted for the 1994 crime bill. They didn't care that Bernie Sanders had not hired a person of color in his congressional offices in 25 years. For me, that was it, because if you don't have any black staff in a quarter century in the district or on Capitol Hill, you can't relate to black people, because you don't have that staff person telling you what life is like. So here's the thing, Bernie, he's done, right? Let me not say that. He might run for president again. Who knows? Hopefully we'll get through this. All right, guys, I appreciate each and every one of you hanging out with me. I'm going to play this clip from Tim Wise, because I don't want us to lose this moment and having a much deeper understanding about race in this country, especially because it still falls on the backs disproportionately of African Americans to pick up the slack for everybody else. Have yourselves a good weekend. Please stay safe. And hopefully by the time we have our conversation on Monday, we will have some concrete election results that puts the presidency completely out of the reach of any kind of recount or court challenge that could be and will be ushered in by Donald Trump and his cult followers. Have a good weekend, guys. Here's a clip from Tim Wise.
I think the actual explanation for why white folks could be so miserably wrong about racism, even when it was obvious, the reason we could be so oblivious is not because we're unfeeling, uncaring, or stupid, unable to see. It's because of something far more sinister and far more difficult to get at, which is this: to be white in 1963 or in 1962, or I would dare say in 2011, is not to have to know any better. right? I don't have to know any better. I don't have to know what people of color experience. If I don't know what people of color experience in my community where we all live, what happens to me? Absolutely nothing. It's not going to be on the test, is it? And by that, I mean whatever test you got to take to get into college, to get out of college, to get any kind of professional certification, you're not going to have to demonstrate that you know anything about the experiences of people of color if you're white. If you want to go be a physician in a community of color, provide health care to people of color, or be a teacher in a community of color, are you going to have to demonstrate that you know the first thing about those people's culture, background, community, or history with the healthcare delivery or educational delivery systems in order to get those jobs? No, you will not. In very few cases would you have to. In fact, people will pat you on the back, won't they, for being willing to go do that work. Why, that's so noble. You're going to go work in an underserved community. That's a nice passive word, underserved, you know? Underprivileged, that's another word, right? What is that? Well, that's like my third grade teacher, that was the passive voice, right? Underprivileged. Nobody did anything to anybody, just there's privilege and there you are under it. And we have no idea how you got down there, nor are we interested in asking.